Welcome to all of you. We are going to finish whatever short part is left of David Hume's Sources of Morals and move on to actually Plato. What I will do for Plato is an introduction today. So let us then proceed, hopefully finish quickly with Hume. We are on page 4. We dealt, of course, at first with how Hume presented the arguments of the rationalists, then the arguments of the empiricists, and how he managed to show that we need actually both reason and empiricism sentiment in order to have true morals, in order to establish sources of morals. The sources then are in need of both. We move on to end. And if we remember last time, we ended, so that we can start on a good footing, we ended by mentioning how morals has something to do with, in its judgment at least, with how also we judged as an analogy works of fine arts. If you remember, we read David Hume saying there are many kinds of beauty, especially in the fine arts, where one has to use much reasoning, so we need reason, if one is to have the right feeling. And of course we have to have feeling, but to have the right feeling, we need to use our reason. And the wrong liking for a work of art can often be corrected by argument and reflection. And I gave you some examples, of course. And so someone who's not judging well, who judges wrongly, we can correct this by argument and, of course, helping them to think, so reason. So he says at the end, there are good reasons to think that moral beauty is of the latter kind. So moral beauty is of the kind then that needs reasoning in order to have the correct feeling. And it can be suitable, it can get a suitable influence on the human mind unless it gets help from reason, from our intellectual faculties, our understanding, our reason. Okay, we stopped here, so let's continue. Hume says, but although this question about which of our faculties is at work in morals is challenging and important, I don't need to go into it any further here. What I do want to do in this enquiry is to discover the true origin, right, sources of morals. If I have the good fortune to succeed in that, it won't be hard to see how far either sentiment or reason enters into all our moral judgment. To achieve my purpose, I'll try to follow a very simple method. I shall analyze the complex of mental qualities that we commonly call personal merit, what someone deserves. I shall consider every attribute of mind that makes man, an object either of respect, something we find again, respect as a feeling in Kant, so either of respect and affection or of hatred and contempt, every habit or sentiment or ability which, if ascribed to any person, implies either praise or blame. Everyone is alert to this difference, so I am pretty sure that I won't ever go seriously wrong in drawing up my lists, putting any item that I am thinking about into the wrong list. All I need do is to look into myself for a moment and consider whether I would want to have this or that quality ascribed to me, and whether, if it were ascribed to me, that would come from a friend or from an enemy. The very nature of language guides us almost infallibly in forming a judgment of this kind. Every language contains one set of words that are understood as approving and another set that are understood as disapproving, and a quite casual acquaintance with the idiom enables us to collect and arrange the lists of estimable and of blamable qualities of men without having to reason about what we are doing. The only role of reasoning in this matter is to discover what is in common to the attributes that bring approval, and what is common to all that bring disapproval, and on that basis to reach the foundation of ethics and find the universal sources from which all blame or approval is ultimately derived. As this is a question of fact and not of abstract theory, the only way we can expect to succeed is by following the experimental method, deriving general maxims from a comparison of particular instances. The other scientific method, in which a general abstract principle is first established and then a variety of inferences and conclusions are drawn from it, may be intrinsically better, but it isn't as well suited to the imperfection of human nature, and is a common source of illusion and error in morals as well as in other subjects. Men are now cured of their passion for hypotheses and systems in natural philosophy, that is, natural science, and won't listen to any arguments that aren't derived from experience. It's high time they tried a similar reformation in all moral proceedings and rejected every system of ethics, however subtle or ingenious, that isn't based on fact and observation. I shall begin my inquiry by considering the social virtues, benevolence and justice. Getting clear about them will probably give us an opening through which the other virtues can be accounted for. Okay. We end with this. Why read this final paragraph? Of course, we're not going to enter into all the specific chapters of Hume's book. We are just doing this here, the very first section, and it's enough for us. Why I wanted to still include this final section is in order to bring in a kind of modification, if you like, to what Hume concludes, and we concluded with him at the end of last lecture. We concluded that Hume says we do need then both a kind of feeling inside, a moral feeling in us, and in order to have the right feeling for the right object, we need to use our faculty of reasoning. Now, Hume here, however, so it seems to us that he's reconciling experience, if you like, or the empiricist stand with the rationalist stand. But here he brings in something more that shows us that, in fact, he's not simply reconciling. He's actually moving toward the empiricist side in the end. What he basically is saying, and what you need to retain, is that the word experiment is central. Okay? Experience is central. So, in the end, Hume says, okay, we need to use our understanding, but what is most important is to use experience. And he says, as we read, you can use, of course, your reason to create a whole system of ethics, a whole system even of morals, right? You can use it, you can create a very solid, very rational, and very logical. You can use logic very well in that case to create an extremely solid system. I read it for you. The other scientific method, which is in fact the rationalist one, in which a general abstract principle, okay, we don't go from experience, we go from the abstract. So we have an abstract principle. In other words, we have something that we consider universal and we deduce, right? The very rationalist way of doing it is not to induce but to deduce, right? So the other scientific method, in which a general abstract principle is first established and then a variety of inferences and conclusions are drawn from it, this is the rationalist method, right? Like Descartes, we take a general and we go to the particular. He says this may be intrinsically better. This method seems to be better, right? As a scientific method. If we remain rationalist, and if the only topic that is in question is a purely rationalist topic, but this is not the case, right? So this is where, again, you have to be very, very clever and very careful in reading Hume. I reread the other scientific method, in which a general abstract principle is first established and then a variety of inferences and conclusions are drawn from it, may be intrinsically better. Yes, it may be, but it's not good. This is what we need. He continues, but it isn't suited. Doesn't work with what we want. It isn't suited, it isn't as well suited to what? To us as humans. It isn't as well suited to the imperfection of human nature, and is a common source of illusion and error in morals as well in other subjects. We cannot rely on something rationalist to describe morals, because morals have a lot to do with our imperfect human nature, if you like, even though I don't like the word here. But anyways, to the imperfection of human nature. Think of yourself living according to principles of mathematics. You simply cannot, right? We do not simply follow the laws of physics. And in fact, this is, of course, the reason also why we are free. Is we don't follow simple principles and deduce things from them as if we were living under a purely logical world, right? Okay? The human world is not, and the human being is not a purely rational, logical being. So, of course, Leibniz would be wrong and Descartes is wrong, and in the end, we have to rely on experience. If I continue, men are now cured of their passion for hypotheses and systems. These are rationalists. You put a hypothesis, you create a whole big system, right? And of course, this doesn't work. We have to go now to nature itself, right? When we study nature, we go to nature. So men are now cured of their passion for hypotheses and systems in natural philosophy, which merely means, by the way, physics. We can just say it's physics. And we won't listen to any arguments that aren't derived from experience. So we know now in physics we go to experience itself and derive things from it. And so Hume says we have to do this not only in physics, not only in biology, not only in other sciences, but also in the moral science. It's high time, he says, they tried a similar reformation in all moral proceedings and rejected every system of ethics, however subtle or ingenious, that isn't based on fact and observation. So in the end, the judgment of Hume is an empiricist judgment. So he is on the empiricist side. He says, of course, we have an understanding. Of course, we have a kind of reason. However, we need it to judge things, to make sure that we have the right feeling for the right object. But all this also we can accomplish because we are relying on experience, and experience is the basis. I add something to this that I mentioned in passing in the first lecture, especially. I add to this fact that for Hume, he's an empiricist, right? And a skeptic. We get from experience everything. In other words, from our senses. Empirii gives us empiricist, as I told you. Empirical means sensation in Greek, and the word is found in Aristotle and in other Greek texts, of course. So from sensation, from our five senses, we get impressions. These impressions then are the truth, because this is what's the clearer to us. So every time I want to find the truth, I go to the impressions. Now, in the absence of the impression, for example, the impression of this table in front of me, that's immediate. This is the best I can have. When it's absent, there is a copy of this. This is what we call an idea. In my mind, there is a copy of the original impression. And of course, you know, like a photograph, a copy is weaker than the original. And it can have some mistakes. I can make some mistakes only in the copy. So the copy is the idea. So our ideas are less perfect than our impressions. Now, there are ideas that are the basis of our judgments that are stronger than others. How does this happen? Let's say every time I see the sun and I see a stone, I touch it, I find that the stone is warm, and I see that 100 times. So I start to believe that the sun heats the stone. So it's a belief. So we have, from repetition, certain things that are very strong beliefs. Now, all of these that start to look very generally always true is what forms for Hume reason. In other words, reason for Hume, let's be very simple and very clear, it's not something independent of experience. So it's not like with the rationalists. You have your body, in Descartes, for example, with the senses, and you have your soul, you have your mind that has reason. For Hume, no, reason is born from experience, right? It is because I have impressions and then ideas, and then certain ideas that form certain beliefs in judgment and through judgments. These very strong beliefs that become general are reason. Okay? So reason comes from experience. Okay? Reason is the fruit of experience, okay? To be very clear. So this helps you to see that even when Hume is saying, I agree that we need to use our reason in order to make the right judgment about the right object and have the right object for the right feeling, reason for him is something also born from experience. So experience is at the very heart of the morals of Hume and remains so. Hume is the foremost, the quintessential empiricist and skeptic. And I will stop the recording here since we are moving to Plato. So today you'll have 2 recordings. So I can say that with this we end Hume. And let's move on to the next introduction to Plato. And since we are thinking about it, actually, let's do that starting Thursday. Let's do Plato on Thursday. So you have a shorter thing to listen to this time, of course, and I will give you no homework. I will give you no homework at this time. And so good luck. And start reading, please, Plato's Republic, Book 10, and we'll go through it entirely.